The Detroit Lions' search for a new offensive coordinator has officially begun and is underway. Of course, they have a lot of big names that are within the organization that they're looking to keep around. Guys like Tanner Engstring, guys like Scotty Montgomery, and other very qualified coaches for the position that have already interviewed and already been working with. But the Detroit Lions are starting to look exteriorly. They're looking at former offensive coordinators, up and coming positional coaches, and other coaching staff members that could potentially fill the role that Ben Johnson leaves behind. And today, we're going to take a look at the first and biggest of these interviews in John Morton, the former Jets offensive coordinator and most recently the pass game coordinator of the Denver Broncos from this past season. John Morton has a lot of up and down opinions about him from the NFL and the media. And today I want to take a look at what he did throughout his NFL career, what he's done throughout his coaching career, the things he's done, the places he's been, and why he may make a good offensive coordinator in Detroit if the Detroit Lions do happen to sign him. So, with that being said, let's take a look at just the situation and how it's unfolding first, and then we'll get into the numbers, the statistics, and whether or not he is the best candidate for the job. So, John Morton did interview with the Detroit Lions, the pass game coordinator for the Denver Broncos in the 2024 to 2025 season, is a prime candidate to replace Ben Johnson for the play calling duties on the offensive side of the ball in Detroit. Now, John Morton has been around the NFL for a very long time. He's been an NFL coach since 1998, and before that was a 5-year NFL player from 1993. He has some of the notable places he's been. This is, of course, not all of them, but as of the 2000s to 2010s, he was the pass game coordinator for, I believe, the Las Vegas Raiders, at the time the Oakland Raiders. He was the Jets offensive coordinator in 2017. He was a Lions assistant in 2022, so does have experience with this roster and with some of these players, and was again the pass game coordinator for the Denver Broncos from 2023 all the way up through their playoff loss this past season. Now, through his time as an offensive coordinator with the Jets, he wasn't very good. The offense in New York in 2017 wasn't very good. They ranked 28th in yards, 24th in points, and 22nd in giveaways. That, of course, is not something that you want the Detroit Lions to become. You want them to stay at the top of the NFL in scoring, in chunk plays, in yardage, in takeaways, and giveaways, and you want the offense to keep rolling to where it was. And while there was certainly some offensive play calling to be had, and there was certainly some issues with that offensive play calling, it's important to remember that the cast of that 2017 Jets team wasn't very good, right? Josh McCown was the starting quarterback. Bilal Powell was the leading rusher for that team. The leading wide receivers were Robbie Anderson and Jermaine Kearse, both of whom failed to reach 1,000 yards on the season. Only twice in 16 games did the New York Jets score over 30 points, and in 11 of their 16 games, they scored less than 21. The quarterback situation wasn't very good. I believe Josh McCown went 5-3 as a starter and then went down, and his backups came in and they didn't win a game. So there was rotation at quarterback due to injury. There was rotation at running back. There was subpar wide receivers. And overall, that, of course, makes it quite difficult to call an offense at the NFL level. Now, from reports that we've seen back from that 2017 season, the reason that the Jets parted ways with John Morton was more because of personality clashes. It wasn't so much that the offensive play calling itself was poor. It wasn't so much that the scheme or the system was a bad one. It was that he really clashed with a lot of players, clashed with a lot of coaches, just personality wise. Didn't seem to get along with the quarterbacks, didn't seem to get along with some of the other assistant coaches, just really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way in New York, which is why he had just a singular season of play calling before being released by the team. Now, in nearly a decade's worth of coaching experience since then, that very well could have changed. He could have improved his personal relationships with a lot of the coaching staff and a lot of the players. You know, I didn't hear too many issues about him with the Denver Broncos. Of course, he was in the building in 2022 as a defensive assistant. So he's been around the NFL. It certainly wasn't bad enough for him to lose favor among NFL coaching staffs in the NFL as a whole, but it is a concern. It is something that needs to be looked at and needs to be monitored. Of the last time this guy was in charge, the offense wasn't very good, granted, with some discrepancies of talent, but also there was a lot of friction when it came to other coaches and players on the roster. Now, this interview reminds me quite a bit of the other interviews that the Detroit Lions did in term when they interviewed Larry Foote for the defensive coordinator role, when most people agreed consensusly that Kelvin Shepard was going to be the guy, right? They turned over their rocks, they did their due diligence, they went on a coaching search and they interviewed Larry Foote for the defensive coordinator job. They hired Casey Johnson as the defensive line coach just the day before. So they're not afraid, and they're showing that they're not afraid to go out and interview people for a job from the outside sources. But I think this is a similar scenario to which, even though it was Larry Foote versus Kelvin Shepard, you interview exteriorly, but you hire interiorly, right? The guys that have been here longer are the better options, right? And that is Scotty Montgomery. That is Tanner Engstrom. I've heard some dark horse candidates of Deuce Staley, who was here before for a couple of years as the Detroit Lions running back coach and assistant head coach before going off to Carolina for personal reasons. Jeff Nixon, the offensive coordinator at Syracuse, has a lot of connections to Dan Campbell and the staff, and again is a dark horse candidate for a coach that could potentially be joining the roster. Now, I'm saying that, those two guys are dark horse candidates for a reason. I think even if they get interviews, there's a chance that it just goes to somebody from the interior, right? It goes to a Tanner Engstrom. It goes to a Scotty Montgomery. And in the case of Morton versus Engstrom or Morton versus Montgomery, it's pretty simple, right? Obviously, yes, Morton has the experience of calling games at the NFL level, but Tanner Engstrom and Scotty Montgomery, this goes for both of them, not just Tanner Engstrom, but they have experience in the offense, right? Where Morton might have more overall NFL experience with different positions and being around the NFL. Engstrom and Scotty Montgomery have experience in this offense. They've worked with it before. They have been around Jared Goff. They've been around Jahmyr Gibbs. They've been around JMO and St. Brown and Laporta and Tim Patrick in the offensive line. They've worked with the staff. They've worked with Dan Campbell, and they are far more closely connected to this group than Morton really ever could be. I think control of the offense, control of the locker room is another thing that those two guys have over. Again, working with those players, being familiar with those players, being respected by those players, and being comfortable with those players are all key factors for what Dan Campbell wants in an offensive coordinator. And when asked about it a few days ago, when I asked about it even as early as last week, he said, Dan Campbell, that they want a play caller that is familiar with the system, that has worked with the terminology before, that Jared Goff feels comfortable with. And he flat out said that they want to hire somebody from inside the organization. So while I do think that this John Morton interview was a real interview, I think he certainly has a chance at the job. I think that the odds that they continue to go from the inside, right? They continue to promote guys like Tanner Engstrom, like Scotty Montgomery, potentially like Hank Fairley, who they just promoted to the run game coordinator for the Detroit Lions. That seems to be their farm system. They like to promote those guys, and then they'll bring other guys in, right? They'll bring in the assistant quarterback coach that they lost in JT Barrett. They'll bring in a wide receivers coach that they lost in Antoine Randall L. They'll bring in positional coaches from outside of the organization. But in any case that they can, the Detroit Lions like to promote, right? They promoted Hank Fraley. They've promoted Kelvin Shepard. They promoted Sean Dion Hamilton when Kelvin Shepard got promoted. So right there from the linebacking room, that's two promotions. They like their guys. Tanner Engstrom himself has been promoted several times within the Detroit Lions organization. And I do think will be again. I don't see an exterior hire coming for the Detroit Lions at a major position like offensive coordinator. It didn't happen for defensive coordinator. And if they're going to roll the dice on an up and coming, linebackers coach, they're going to roll the dice on an up and coming pass game coordinator, they're going to roll the dice with somebody who knows the system best. They're not going to do it with somebody from outside of the organization who's never worked with Jared Goff before and with all the extracurriculars, right? You don't know how their personalities will clash. You don't know how the systems and schematically they're going to, combine and work together. Whereas if you promote Tanner Engstrom, you know he's going to run Ben Johnson's offense. It's the offense he's been running for 4 years. It's the offense he's been working with for 4 years. It's the quarterback and the running back and the wide receiver and the tight end and the offensive line that he's been working with for 2, 3, 4 years at this point, depending on when guys got there. So while I think this John Morton interview is important, I think that Engstrom is still the guy. I think that or Scotty Montgomery will take the offensive play calling duties. And quite honestly, I feel a lot more secure with that than bringing in John Morton to be the offensive coordinator. Now, as I said, they're going to bring in other guys. They're going to have to promote somebody else to pass game coordinator. They're going to have to promote somebody else to wide receivers coach. They're going to have to promote an assistant quarterbacks coach. If Mark Brunell still leaves, they're going to have to hire a quarterbacks coach. So there are outside hires coming. But when it comes to offensive coordinator, I think it will be internal, and I do think it will be Tanner Engstrom. So with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Just a quick update on the most recent interviews for the offensive coordinator for position in Detroit. John Morton is interviewed, but I think the best case option, I think the most likely option is still a guy from inside the building. So with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about the interview, what you think about the position as a whole. Do you want to see an outside hire with some experience calling plays, or do you feel comfortable running it up with Tanner Engstrom or Scotty Montgomery or any of the other options within the Detroit Lions organization? I'm curious to hear your guys' opinions on both sides of the argument, but with that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions!